Okay, now I'm going to switch back to the pink so you can see row 4. Slip stitch into the chain 1 space, chain 4, single crochet, sweater stitch in the chain 1 space, sweater stitch in the chain 1 space. You do your sweater stitch in the chain 1 space all the way to the end till you get to the stitch marker. When you get to the chain 1 space with the stitch marker, you're going to make 2 sweater stitches and then place the stitch marker in between those 2 sweater stitches. So there's 1, double crochet, chain 1, 2. So now I have 2 sweater stitches. You're going to stick your stitch marker right in between the 2 stitches, between the single crochet of the first sweater stitch and the double crochet of the second sweater stitch. You're going to put your stitch marker there. Sweater stitch in the end, chain 1 space. Now you're at your second stitch marker. I'm going to put 2 sweater stitches in that chain 1 space. 1, 2. And again, you're going to put your stitch marker in between those 2 stitches. And then working in the chain 1 spaces to the end, you do your sweater stitch. So you have your last sweater stitch of row 2, your end row, and then your first sweater stitch going up the other side. Then you have your sweater stitch before, in, and after on row 3. Row 4, there's 2 in the chain 1 space, 1 in the chain 1 space, 2 in the chain 1 space, with the stitch marker in between the 2 stitches. Don't work before and after anymore. You just work in between those 2 stitches. For row 5, chain 4, single crochet, working in the chain 1 spaces of the sweater stitch of the previous row, you make your sweater stitch. Now here's your 2 in the corner. You're going to do, in the chain 1 space, you're going to do a sweater stitch. Double crochet, chain 1, single crochet. In the space between the stitches where your stitch marker is, you're going to do a sweater stitch. So there's you're going to put your stitch marker in that chain 1 space. In the next chain 1 space, you're going to do your sweater stitch. Next chain 1 space, sweater stitch. Next chain 1 space, sweater stitch. Now you're at your stitch marker. You're going to sweater stitch in between those two stitches. Double crochet, chain 1 single crochet, and put your stitch marker in that chain 1 space. Then in the next chain 1 space, you work your sweater stitch. All the way to the end. So you have your end row here with a sweater stitch before and after, and one in the middle of the chain 1 space. When you're working your corners, you're going to work, if the stitch marker is in a chain 1 space, that means you put 2 SWS's in there. If the stitch marker is in between the 2 sweater stitches, you do a stitch in the sweater stitch in the chain 1 space, you do 1 in the space between, and then you do 1 in the next chain 1 space. So you'll be alternating rows. So the next row, when you get down here, you'll be putting 2 sweater stitches in, and your stitch marker will go in between the 2 sweater stitches like we did before. And you just alternate that out till you get to the number of rows that correspond with the size that you're making. So if you're looking at the directions, this would be the 15 down to here, 1 in the corner, 3 across the bottom, 1 in the corner, and then 15 down the side. Okay? So you're alternating. 1, 2, 1. The next row would be 2, then 1 and 2, 1 and 2, alternating all the way through. I hope this helps. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to PM me on Facebook. Good luck. Can't wait to see your finished product.